Welcome to a Chat with Heart podcast. I'm your host, Christina Martin. I'm here to help guide heartfelt conversations with new and old friends I've met from just being alive or touring my music around North America and other parts of the world. I chat with people I feel a kinship with and that I genuinely believe we can learn from. Our personal stories have great power to heal, influence, and inspire. All we have to do is show up for the conversation.
We just talk about it. We could shine a light, we could break a dark day. If we just talk about it, we can cut away, we can make a brighter day.
Hello. We've officially entered year 2 of hosting this podcast. I want to say thank you for listening. Thanks to all my monthly and yearly supporters on Patreon, which helps me pay for things and affords me time to produce this podcast with my partner, Dale. Dale and I have had a few weeks off from working on this podcast. It's been both stressful and lovely this holiday season. Lovely because we got to spend time with some of our family and friends. I learned how to make a vegan Alfredo sauce that's pretty close to the real deal. Now Dale wants to have it every night. We also made a shit ton of vegan cupcakes. So many cupcakes. Carrot cake and chocolate zucchini, complete with frosting. That's what made the holiday season pretty lovely for us. But it was also extremely stressful because just before Christmas, this is some bad news. I had posted a photo of Dale and our cat Mama on my social media. We found out that the cat, who we thought was a stray, that we had posted in July looking for a home for her with no bites, so we decided to adopt her in August. It turns out she belonged to one of our neighbors. So that was about a week and a half of correspondence via Facebook, and we decided to give her back. It was stressful, sad, and now she's gone. I can say I'm very happy we had her in our home for 6 months. She had a whole backstory we knew nothing about. We thought she was a kitten. Turns out she's a 6-year-old cat. Long story short, it was really good to see her reunited with her family, but it is weird not having her wake me up at 6 a.m. Or attacking our feet in bed every night, which sound like really annoying things, but I don't know, we kind of grew to like them. Yeah, so that was weird and stressful. But on the upside, I think we have better communication now with our neighbors. We'll be able to see the cat, if she's outside and comes over to visit, and she will be loved, and I hope she's enjoying snuggles with her family in the neighborhood. I wish I could interview the cat for the podcast, but sadly she does not speak human. Today, my guest shares a plethora of magic moments from her lifetime as a celebrated documentary photographer and filmmaker. Nance Ackerman has been making images and film around the world for over 30 years. Her work has been featured in Time, Newsweek, Canadian Geographic, New York Times, and Canada's national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, and she was the assistant photo editor at the Montreal Gazette for several years before going freelance. Her work has been described as, and I love this, artivism, creating art to create change. I was lucky to work with her during the recording of my 2015 album, It'll Be All Right. That was the first time I'd ever collaborated with a documentary filmmaker, and I'm so glad our paths crossed. I really look forward to future opportunities to get to work with Nance again. And so, my little heartbeat listeners, I hope you'll enjoy this chat with Heart with Nance Ackerman. She shares so many of her magic moments, and I thought, you know what? I would love it if you wanted to call the Heartbeat Hotline and share one of your magic moments. And so maybe we'll get to play your message on the podcast. The Heartbeat Hotline is 1-902-669-4769. We'll repeat that at the end of this episode. You can ask me anything you want about life, the podcast, leave a comment, or share one of your magic moments. I feel like you have been on the go ever since the last time I would have seen you. Like you just go all around the world.
Yeah.
I want to start by saying that we spent the entire weekend. It was so wonderful watching most of your documentaries.
Oh, Jesus, that's a depressing little medley, isn't it?
I did
watch the happy one. I have one happy one.
You mean the
the Bongro?
Yeah, the Bongro voice. That was really uplifting. And
oh, good.
Yeah, I did cry a lot, but like, there's something about there was a lot of joy in it as well. Like, but yes, I cried, and I was going to ask you if you cry while you're working.
Did I cry a lot? I cry a lot. I'm a crier. I'm a bad crier. Well, you know that. Didn't I cry while I was shooting your? I think I might have.
I think you were very good at, like, I knew you were there, but I didn't know you were there at the same time. Like, y'all were.
I think I cried just editing your stuff. That was the kicker, because it was before the days of Tentacle syncing up all our audio. So I had to sync all our audio by hand. Yes, I did cry editing your videos, but no, I do cry. I would say I cried a lot with 4 Feet Up, my child poverty film. I cried a lot with Conviction, but that was mainly the filmmaking process was really difficult. Mm-hmm. And because it was such a massive collaboration. But and I cried with Bongro because I miss them. I miss my boys.
I bet. Okay, well, do you recall like a first moment in your life when you just said to yourself, you know, Nance, I'm gonna be a critically acclaimed storyteller?
Oh yeah, that's what I said when I was 5 years old. No, I was maybe 11 years old, and I wrote a letter to the National Geographic magazine, and I wrote a letter to Grosvenor, the guy that started the whole National Geographic Society, and I wrote him and said, I want to travel around the world. I want to tell people stories. What do I do? And he wrote back and he said, well, why don't you be, he actually suggested I be an archaeologist.
Huh.
Right? Which was interesting because I thought, I don't know, that was his suggestion. So I was like, okay. I was 11, that sounded cool.
Yeah.
It sounded, all the movies about archaeologists and might have been pre-Raiders of the Lost Ark. But anyway, I basically said, okay. So I went, and when I got out of high school, I went to become a geologist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I have a geology degree.
You and Dale's father, he was a geologist, I guess once a geologist, always a geologist. Yeah, you guys would have lots of rocks to talk about.
Yeah, but it didn't, the problem is that I didn't really care that much about rocks. And what I cared about was telling people stories. So I ended up going, and I also really had a problem with the environmental impacts of the kind of geology I was doing out of university. Like, it was just awful. It was mining, basically, and gold mining, which is the worst, one of the worst. And I ended up, in order to avoid going down in the mine, I would just take pictures of everything. So I'd take pictures of the miners, and I'd take pictures of I actually found a bunch of gold, and I just took pictures of it all. And then I'd come up to the surface and I'd print all the pictures. And finally my boss said, I actually think, Nance, you're a better photographer than you are a geologist.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yeah, I think so too. I can't live with myself tearing apart the environment the way this does. And he said, go to Toronto. I'll give you 3 months. Try your hand at photography. And if you come back, you still have a job. And if you don't come back, good luck.
So you went away for 3 months. Now, Like at this time, did you really have kind of like, okay, well, this could be my path? Or were you still sort of just like,
No, I knew I wanted to be a photographer.
okay, all right.
I really wanted to be I wanted to tell stories with photos. And I had one camera and one lens. And I actually I walked into a camera store because I figured, geez, I better get technically better at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I walked into a Japan camera center on Yonge and Bloor, right at Yonge and Bloor. And I just walked in and said, I need a job. I need to learn about cameras. And they said, sure. So they hired me. And then the funniest thing is that I think like 2 nights later, I was only in town for like a week, if that. And I saw a big ad for I think it was a Nat Geo photographer was having a show and a slideshow. So I went and he said in the middle of it, he said, oh, we've got another photographer in the crowd and her name is Gail Harvey. And she's a wonderful photographer. She works all over the world. And so the whole time I didn't even pay attention to him. I was just like, Gail Harvey, Gail Harvey, Gail Harvey. So at the end of it, I walked up to her and I said, do you need an assistant? I'll carry your camera bag. I'll do anything. I just want to follow you around. And she said, well, actually, I'm doing the Toronto International Film Festival and I need somebody to run film for me. And this is back in the day of film. So she just said, come with me. And so I was shooting that year. I think I did portraits of like Julie Andrews, Dustin Hoffman. I got to hang out with the Talking Heads. I went to a party with David Byrne. Like it was insane.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was great. And so she just became my mentor and I kind of went from there.
You're doing photography. You're loving it. You're storytelling.
Yeah.
Documentary filmmaking. Like, was there like a project you were assigned to where you're like, oh, now I want to direct. Now I want to write. Now I want to, get into film.
What it was totally like subject driven. Like I was actually on assignment for the Toronto Star, I think, shooting the OxyContin crisis up in Cape Breton, back in early 2000s when they had like 21 people die in like 18 months or something, like young people. So I went up with a reporter and we went up and just spent like 3 days kind of running around Glace Bay and trying to get contacts and everything. And she wasn't like she's a really good reporter, but I don't think she had a ton of experience in kind of the world of drugs.
But you had plenty.
I've lived a lot. So I just sort of could spot people that were high. So it was like, they're using. And so we just follow them and go talk to them and ask what's going on. And we just ran into the most amazing guy. And I don't know if you watched Cottonland.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's my first film. So very old school doc now. I look at it now and it's like, oh, yikes. But Eddie, the main character in that film, was an ex-addict, recovering addict. His wife was still using. A lot of people, all his buddies were still using except for 2, I think. And he said, listen, I want to make documentary films. I was like, well, I'm a photographer. I can't really help you out. And he said, no, I think you can. I think we could make a film together. And I was like, well, okay, I'll see what I can do. So I got a hold of a friend who was a director and had experience with the film board. I thought, National Film Board. And I said, and this was Monique LeBlanc, who was a great help to me. And she was like, yeah, sure, I'll bring you to the film board, but you need to direct it, not me. And I was like, I don't know how to direct a film. Blah, blah. And she said, yeah, you do. You've been storytelling for 25 years. I think you can handle it. So that was my first, and I never had any intention of being a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. It was just a next step that seemed very logical. And then once you kind of do it, especially like the music and the sound and the editing and to me, it's all that stuff after that was really what got me excited, because I'd already done that kind of other capturing people's stories. But because Jamie and I have done almost all the music for almost all of my films.
I loved hearing you sing the songs. I was like, that's Nance. There were a couple of songs in different docs that I
Yeah.
believe you were singing, and I know you both did. Jamie is your partner. And hi, Jamie. I mean, if he's going to listen to this, I want to say hi.
Oh, I don't know. I sang at the end of 4 Feet Up, and I sang in Cottonland, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah, both the end of Cottonland, and Jamie and I sang together on Cottonland. And Bhangra, I don't think I sang in Bhangra, but I played a lot of instruments in Bhangra. And Conviction I sang, but you would never know. Like I blended with all those women's voices.
Oh, cool.
All the women in the prison.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the music for all of them. I love the sound, all the editing.
Yeah.
The Cottonland, I was talking to Dale about how, like, I could tell it was one of your earlier films, but not because of any quality issues or just because it was really good. And I think it was one of the first pieces I would have seen back when I first met you. Like, I think I only had access to maybe a trailer, and I was like, oh, I would love to work with this woman. But when watching the whole thing, I just thought, this is just so today, also, relevant and urgent, the messaging, and it just, it hasn't like expired, is what I'm telling this.
Well, yeah.
It's unfortunately like, it's sad, but true with, the opioid crisis epidemic it's not gone.
Not gone anywhere. It's just the drugs have changed.
Yeah.
And also the whole idea of taking away a community's livelihood and the sort of post-industrial malaise that happens and what people turn to. That's happening all over the world all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
In watching Eddie in the storytelling, and just kind of imagining how you two were working, one question that came up was, we're watching people's tell very difficult stories, and they're really opening up and telling you, some of the worst experiences that I think that's hard to get at in people. I mean, I know I can be guarded with certain people. Like, I mean, so was in that case in Cottonland, was Eddie? Did that allow for some of the subjects to have a little bit more trust, or did you find that people were just so open, regardless of it being Eddie or you, to telling their stories?
Well, I think it's a combination. The thing is, they had felt so ignored up there, and so sort of judged and discriminated against and not listened to, and they were like screaming out in the neighborhoods like, we're all dying here and no one cares. And I think so there was an element of, I want to tell my story, and that's where Eddie came in. I mean, he was just so he had very clear vision. He was a real cinephile. He loved movies, and so just his excitement for the project got the other guys excited for the project, and there was that element of trust. I would say one of my biggest talents, where I kind of lack in technical ability and stuff, because I don't have any formal training, I make up for in being able, like you say, to get people to trust me, because I'm trustworthy, and I tend to always collaborate with my subjects. I don't do films about people. I work with people to tell their stories. So, and I run everything by them. They're in every one of my films. It has been a collaborative, highly collaborative process, which is hard. Like I sometimes look at other doc filmmakers and I'm like, oh man, I would love just go in, go out and make whatever I want. But that's not how it goes with me. I don't think it's ethical in this day and age, actually, to tell those kinds of intimate stories. I mean, if you're telling a story about, designing shoes or something, whatever, but if you're telling stories of people's trauma and their life struggles, I just don't think it's fair to not collaborate.
You don't want to rewrite their stories, Nance?
Yeah, I don't want to rewrite their stories. Well, and also, I mean, and it's not to say I can't, like, I can relate to almost every single story that I've told, except possibly for Bhangra. the Bhangra boys are different, but I can pretty well relate to almost everybody and I can draw on my own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel, and I do think that's why people trust me, is because I always share an awful lot of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them a lot about my own trauma and my childhood and my, struggles. And that's the secret sauce, if you ask me.
Secret sauce. Are there any of your life pivotal moments, it can be traumas, that you feel comfortable sharing that you feel maybe even help contribute to you wanting to keep doing what you're doing? What the fuck happened to you, Nance? God.
Yeah. I honestly don't have any shame or any guilt or any shame and guilt are not things I regret. Even I don't bother with that one either. So
That's good. God, how can you wait? You got to tell me how to get there.
I have one I don't know. Just get a bad memory.
Okay, yeah.
I just forget everything.
All right.
No. Well, actually, my collaborators in Conviction would say that's right. She doesn't remember anything. Yeah. No. I mean, I think why do I tell hurting stories? Basically. Yeah. I mean, I think I've had quite a bit of trauma in my life, and I had a lot of abuse as a child, and I was raped when I was 15, and was abused by a boyfriend for several years, heavily. And so I guess I just sort of feel like I understand pain. And so when it happens to me in other circumstances, like when I'm covering something, and when I was covering the war in Beirut in Lebanon in the 80s, it actually just occurred to me. I don't know if I told you this story, I can't remember, but I was actually, I was reading an excerpt out of Lindsay Addario. She's a famous photographer, photojournalist covering all the wars all around the world. And, it's an excerpt from her book. I think she was kidnapped or she was abducted in Libya. And it was about these 3 days or 6 days, whatever, that she was abducted. And I read the description. I was like, holy shit, I was abducted. Like, I didn't realize when I was in Lebanon, I got scooped up by the Lebanese forces. Actually, there was about, at the time, there might've been 13, 14 factions in Lebanon. So, and I had like 5 different photo IDs around my neck, and and if you screwed up and showed the wrong, you were in trouble. But I ended up being the only journalist left in Lebanon. Everybody had pulled out in Beirut because it was too dangerous. They were kidnapping the Hezbollah, taking a bunch of Americans and yada, yada. So I was the only one there. And I was actually just covering, it's hysterical. I was just covering for the Montreal Gazette. They wanted a Christmas story. So I found this Canadian nun that ran an orphanage up in the mountains above Beirut. So that was going to be our Christmas story, because there's a big Lebanese population in Montreal. And so I head off. Well, first of all, do you want this? This is a great story.
Yes, I want this story. I want.
So I go to my boss at the Gazette and I go, I have a Christmas story for you, this nun in Beirut, because I've always wanted to go to Lebanon. And he's like, yeah, well, but I'm not sending you to Beirut. It's too dangerous. And I'm like, you don't have to send me. I'll take a vacation. So I took 5 weeks vacation, all my vacation for the whole year. And I flew to Lebanon. Well, I flew to Cyprus because the airport wasn't open. They were bombing the airport. They were also bombing the ferry I was on. So there were bombs like landing in the ocean. But anyway, I got there and I was wandering the streets trying to find these kids that lived on the Green Line and that would end up in the orphanage. And this Jeep pulls up and it's filled with Lebanese forces guys. And I'm like, oh shit, which pass do I show them? And they were like, get in. So I was like, okay. So I got in their Jeep and they stuck an RPG, rocket propelled grenade launcher, between my legs. I had AK-47s all around my head. And they were like, we're taking you up to the mountains. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Sure. Go to the mountains. Let's go to the mountains.
Thanks for the ride.
And they were, yeah. I figured I would, I think this is going to be great. I'm kind of embedded with the Lebanese forces. This is fun. And so we went,
God.
well, I was like 26 or something. Anyway, so we get up to their bunker and, I had a little mattress and then they gave me some kibbe, which is like raw meat, and a bunch of arak, which is their like ouzo booze. So that was nice. And I ended up staying there. I kept saying, I think I've got enough shots of you guys in the bunker and, snipering at the Hezbollah and everybody else. I said, I think I've got enough shots here. I can go home.
Good to go. Yeah, I'm good.
Go.
I'm good to go. Yeah.
And they were like, no, you're not going. And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, we want to bring you up. The General Aoun there was a coup. It was a military coup. They'd just taken over the palace, the presidential palace. They had car bombed the president. He was like 4 blocks away, which shook everything. Anyway, they car bombed him, and I was supposed to go up because I was the only journalist. They said, you're the only journalist in the city. You have to interview General Aoun and get his voice out over the wire. And I'm like, well, dudes, I'm a photographer. I'm not a news reporter. I'm not a correspondent.
You are now, Nance.
Exactly. So I was like, but if it'll get me out of this bunker, I'll go talk to the general. So
Smart.
They drive me up, and there's this whole protest, and I'm sitting up in this Jeep, and people are like waving their flags, and oh my God, it was crazy. And I go up to this palace, and I'm sitting like face to face with General Aoun, who stayed in power for a very long time. And I'm like, taking notes, like pretending like I had any idea of his history I was there to photograph a nun, but anyway, it was pretty funny. So I did this whole interview with them and a story about that experience. And they were like, thank you very much. And then they dropped me off back down by the Green Line and so but I had no choice. I was stuck in this bunker for 3 days.
With the kibbe and the ouzo.
With the kibbe and the
which, Nance, I did have some sympathy for you at the beginning, but then I was like, wait a second, this sounds like they're treating you pretty good. But
well, yeah. Well, Lebanese food,
yeah. Dale's quarter Lebanese.
Is he really?
My brother Stefan was half Lebanese. Yeah.
Just the food, I swear. I could just, that could be my main staple. I could just live on Lebanese food.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my abducted in a war zone story.
Did your boss then give you back your vacation time for the incredible?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I had like a 6-part series in the paper. I'll, double whatever. And
yeah.
No, he didn't. Yeah.
Getting to know a little bit more about your background. And I have more questions about 4 Feet Up, and I can absolutely see why this was such just a perfect match for you, really. And I could see why it would make you cry when you're working on it. How did you find out about Isaiah and his family?
Through Debbie Reamer, the social worker in the film.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I had worked with her for a woman's NGO, and Chrysalis House, is that right? Chrysalis House in Kentville.
Yep.
I was on the board there, or I was on a fundraising committee or something. Anyway, so I knew her through that. And I just called her one day and said, listen, the National Film Board actually got a hold of me and wanted me to do this story. And I actually didn't want to do it. I was like, I don't think I could handle it.
Like emotionally.
Yeah. I'm a single mom. I just, God, at that point, actually, I was probably living I think I remember saying, I can just roll over a bed and photograph my own kids. I think I was living well below the poverty line then. Most documentary filmmakers do. But yeah, so I ended up just calling her and saying, do you know, I would, and I said to the film board, the only way I'm going to do it, I'm not going to interview government. I'm not going to do any of that. If it's 4 feet off the ground and through a little boy's or a little kid's eyes, I'll do that. But I'm not doing go around and interview government officials kind of story. So that's what I did. So she said, I had just said to her, do you have a boy that, I mean, a kid that you know of that likes to communicate and has a big heart and likes to like talk to strangers and tell them about his story? And she said, oh my, I have the most magical child.
Oh.
And he to this day is still a magical guy.
Well, that's what I was wondering. So you spent 2 years with this family.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like, how, like, do you keep in touch with?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
they had a really rough winter last winter. I was away.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were doing really, really well. And then they lost they had a nice, they had a house, and they were, they went through some bad times, and then they got a house, and things got better, and then they lost their house. So it ended up at one point this winter, Jen and Frank were camping up until December. They were at a campground camping, and the kids were sort of straying at girlfriends and boyfriends and were just sort of scattered. They were in really bad shape. She was in the hospital, and then Ethan was going to go visit her in the hospital, and he crashed, got hit by a car. Anyway, it was just this horrible year. But generally speaking, after the film, they did quite well. They did okay. Still struggling, but God, that family is just so full of love. They were such lovey bugs. Yeah.
I love the part where they just took your camera and started taking photos, and how those photos became part of the story. And does he still work with any media?
Well,
forms?
he wanted to be a graphic designer. He's very artistic, obviously. And then he was talking about being a tattoo, like designing tattoos. And yeah, he was going to go to NSCC for design, but he got a really good job managing a farm market out here. And he just sort of felt like that was kind of what he was going to stick with. So he's managing a farm market.
That's cool.
It's very cool, and everyone loves him, and he does a great job. And I think he's had that job for quite a while, like 3 years, 4 years or something.
Is it hard not to intervene? And, at what point would you, like in 4 Feet Up, there's one point where Isaiah's mommy goes to get food with her, and it's cold out, and they have to walk because they don't have a car, and it's all being shot. The story is being told. It's, but yeah, like, I mean, do you ever go, geez, I wish we could just give them a ride? Because, is that like a rule that you just, you can't?
I might get in a lot of shit for this, but I always help. I always intervene. Like, I'm a person and a mother and a woman way before I'm a filmmaker and a journalist and anything else. So there's a lot of documentary filmmakers and documentarians that I've been on oodles of panel discussions about this, and I will always put my camera down and help somebody. I don't care. I always say that the book I could have created with the shots I could have taken when my camera was down and I was helping somebody. I'd be a lot wealthier right now, probably. But no, I did help, and we all do help. I mean, anybody I work with helps. I'm not gonna. So what I try to do is depict what's going on in their lives when I'm not there. So that shot of them walking, they did do that walk every day. They did that walk every time they went to the food bank. And so we shot it that way. But, then I chucked all the groceries in my car and we drove. I mean, it's like, I'm not.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we did.
Wow.
We'd take Jen shopping, and, and there was a lot of help from producers and other people too. And so we'd take them shopping for food. But I mean, when that's okay for now, but that in a couple of weeks, they're still going to go to bed hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I was rich. I wish I could change everybody's lives I work with, but
I bet that would be.
It's really hard.
Part of the heartbreak from doing, this work that you're really passionate about is that you can't provide for everybody. You can't fix every.
No. Yeah. I mean, with Conviction, myself and Ariel and Teresa, my co-directors, we did everything we could to help Elizabeth Fry Society with, any of their campaigns and their fundraising. And in terms of the women themselves, it was, that was full on. Yeah, that was just full on. Yeah.
So when you're shooting a doc, and sometimes I'm assuming you're shooting multiple projects, you're just on multiple projects, but are you basically on call all the time? Like, or do you have times where you're like, okay, I'm not making myself available here? How does it work? I've always been curious about that.
Well, when you're your own director, and generally, like, I have producers that I work with, but generally I am in charge of the storytelling. I'm the creative force in it. So you're always it depends on the project. So Conviction, many, 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 many times I was called in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and dealing with issues that came up in these women's lives because their lives were always in crisis. They were in and out of prison. So yes, I was because I was shooting, I was always the one that went. Sometimes the other directors would go, but most of the time it was me.
Would those have been like the shots when somebody was released, something happens when they're out and someone's got to go, someone has to go and shoot?
Yeah, that's me. So yes, on call for something like that. But then something like Behind the Bongo Boys, it was sort of we created the shooting schedule. And it was like, if they were like, oh, we're making a big meal, like, come on over, I'd jump in my car and I'd go on over. But it's Indian food, so it was great.
Nice. Yeah.
I think I'm starting to think I do all my documentaries about food. Yeah, so they would just sort of say, we're doing this, and do you want to? And same, I'm working on a doc now about trying to save the hemlock, and it's it's just I have my subjects call me and say, I think this might be. So yeah, I'm kind of always on call, but depending on the project, it's not like 3 a.m. like Conviction was, or Cottonland was sort of run and gun too. That was kind of chasing a lot of things.
There must be projects where you've started them and then you're like, this actually isn't a compelling story after all.
Oh, that's funny. No, it's not so much that I bail. It's that I can't get it funded,
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's that, because you need funding, right? I need to pay my bills. So yeah.
Sing it, sister.
Yeah. Like all artists, you can't run around with your guitar or your camera and make a living if no one's going to pay you for it.
I tried that too. You're right.
Yeah.
It doesn't work, and I got tired.
Yeah, I know. Well, basically, yeah. That's so 50% of the time, that's what I'm doing too. But no, I've had what I thought were awesome ideas, but because it doesn't have a celebrity attached, or it doesn't have, Bridezilla or whatever is the going thing in reality TV these days, it doesn't go. So I've had projects that I thought were awesome, but people didn't pick up on it.
Well, they're probably still awesome, and you never know in the future. But on that note, do you have a guilty pleasure when it comes to reality TV shows? Like, are you watching like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or Bachelorette or any of that kind of? No,
you know what it
nothing?
is?
What?
Oh no, I have one. I have many. No, I'm a real. No, it's not necessarily. See, it doesn't qualify as reality, but it's sort of. You don't want a lot of people to know. Like, I'm totally addicted to Outlander. Well, the main character is a woman who's amazing, but no, it's like just a romantic time travel. It's really, but the lead character's the guy who's like hotter than shit. Anyway, he's Jamie Fraser is his name, and he's Scottish named Jamie, and that's my husband. So I figure it's okay.
Oh, it's totally okay.
It's totally okay. Yeah, no. So that's my guilty pleasure, is like watching a bunch of hot guys run around in kilts. But whatever.
I think that you definitely deserve to have as many guilty pleasures as you want. Magic moments, because you said you were a magic moment junkie. So
I am.
can you define what's for you a magic moment in photography or documentary filmmaking? What the fuck is a magic moment
What
for
the
you?
fuck is a magic moment? I guess it's where
Everything falls apart?
sometimes, like because I run photography workshops, right? All around the world.
I know, and that's another. I'm so excited to ask you about this one too. With
Yeah.
because you hear these.
Yeah. Well, they lately because of COVID, they kind of died, but they're coming back to life. We're supposedly going to Morocco in March, but
Cousins photo tours, by the way.
yeah, this is with my cousin. I would say my magic moments have, it's almost always when I'm traveling, but I mean, I've had a few here at home, but not. It's when you when you get kind of jolted from your daily pressure and life and worries and you're just sort of in awe of something that's happening around you that you can't control, you can't stop or start. It just is happening to you. And I love being out of control that way because I'm a very creatively, I'm a very controlling. Anybody who's, well, you've been on set with me. I know what I want, right? I'm pretty.
Hey, same. I think we're of the same.
Yeah, we are very similar that way for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very controlling that way. So I guess it hits me when I am out of control and it just happens. And it's happened so many times. And I said to so many people, if I died tomorrow, I'd be perfectly happy because I've had so many magic moments in my life that, and a lot of them are with our cousins' photo tours. Almost, all of them have been generally when I'm working. But with the photo tours, I mean, they're just things that happen. Like we had a group of, we went to northern Vietnam and we started way north. I mean, where nobody goes and right up against the border of China. And we started in Hanoi and we had quite a large group, but one guy had actually been a doctor in Vietnam and he was going back to kind of, because he'd had a lot of PTSD from it. And he said it just altered his world. And so he wanted to walk around the streets of Hanoi. And so we were invited because we always do local, like we don't go and we, there's a tourist thing, we go the opposite direction and we just hang out with locals. And so we were hanging out with this local woman and she brought us to her village and we were walking around the village and we were like, where is everybody? And we went in the temple and there was this meeting going on of all the elders in the community. And we just kind of were like, oh, sorry, we're trying to close the doors, like didn't mean to disturb your meeting. And they were like, no, of course, come. And they were all, if you might notice, all my magic moments have something to do with substances.
Oh, okay. Booze.
Well, booze or something else.
Gotcha.
So start pouring this rice wine, everyone's drinking rice wine. It's just crazy. And we all sat down on the ground with them. And then all of a sudden this guy, and he was quite old. He was 70 something years old, 73 or something like that on our trip. And he looked over at this man and they just looked at each other and both of them reached across because it was like a big, all the food in the middle. They reached across all this and they just grabbed each other's shoulders and burst into tears. And he was a northern Vietnamese soldier and had, because in the war, I guess American doctors had to still, like, didn't matter if they were North or South Vietnamese, they still had to treat them and cure them. So he had come into his hospital and that he had saved his life. This Viet Cong, I guess. And our guy that came with us had saved the guy's life and they had become friends, but it was kind of unheard of because he was the enemy. He was a POW, right? So he was the enemy, but they had become friends and then they hadn't seen each other. And the two of them and everybody in the room was just like tears just streaming down their face. Yeah, it was magical. Like, and the fact, how could you possibly have known that was going to happen? Anyway, it was just incredible. And they both knew each other and remembered each other and what he'd done for him. And it was just stuff like that happens all the time to me for some reason. But yeah, that was a magical one, really magical. Yeah. And then, I mean, I have a thing in a cave in Guatemala that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, what was that? We can't. Well, what?
What?
Don't just stop. Yeah, tell me.
Oh God, I can't tell it. I start crying. That's the problem.
Oh, that's okay. I think that's a magic moment for this podcast.
I was working for the Smithsonian back when I was just still a photographer before filmmaking, and they had asked me to come document because they had this theory. The Hopi had a theory in Arizona that they came from Maya. Actually, a lot of tribes believed everybody came from the Maya, but so they wanted to go down and have two chiefs meet down in, it's like a 10-hour drive in the back. I mean, anyway, really remote. Had not seen hardly any white people. It was very, very remote. In the middle of actually it was sort of down southern middle of the country. And they had asked me to come document it. So I went with them. And then to start off this, and it was just magical seeing this Hopi chief and this Mayan chief. But they had a cave in the side of the mountain, and they had this ceremony. And I was sitting next to a Hopi guy who was translating. He was translating from Spanish, and then you had a Mayan translator translating from Mayan to Spanish. And we were all just, and I was like snapping pictures and then kind of put my camera away and just took part of this ceremony, which was really amazing. But, after about 3 hours of kneeling at the mouth of this cave, dripping sweat and kind of, I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, this is good. Thank you very much. I'd like to, go get some food. And they were like, no, this has just started.
You can't go anywhere.
You can't go anywhere. So I'm kneeling at the mouth of this cave, and everybody, they do kind of a very similar to indigenous ceremonies all over the world. They do sort of a smudging thing. And then all of a sudden he got to me and he started doing a smudging cleansing, and suddenly the fire flamed up and he started kind of screaming, like, which anybody that knows anything about Mayan shamans, they don't generally scream. So it was everybody, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what have I done?
He sees me.
Yeah, well, because I was kind of, I don't think I was joking, but I think I was being just a little glib, and I get glib when I get nervous. So I was kind of like, I just wanted to blend in, and, I was the only white-ish person there. And I kind of just wanted to blend, and he got to me and was just lost it. Right. And I'm asking the guy next to me, I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? He says, you are empty inside. And I'm like, well, okay. Like, what am I supposed to do about that? No, but sort of like spiritually empty inside. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I get that. I would say that I hadn't had a lot of spiritual experiences. Anyway, I just kind of was like, okay, but can he just move on? And they were like, no, he wants you to go into the cave with him. Nobody else had gone into the cave. A couple people had gone into the cave, but sort of like the two chiefs, but nobody else. Anyway, got brought into the cave, and I would say I was kneeling there in the cave with this shaman. I basically went into another realm. It was 1,000,000 degrees in there, and he was chanting at me, and every once in a while he'd take a mouthful of this beautiful water and he'd spray it in my face. And it was like he'd spit it all over my face, and it was the most beautiful. And he started, really a lot of chanting, and the whole village had come down because they sort of heard there was a problem. So there was probably 100 Mayan people, like women, children, and the children were like, I could see out through the mouth of the cave. They were like, falling asleep against standing up and waiting. And it was hours. I'm talking 4, 5, 6 hours. I don't know. I lost all sense of time. And he was like, your daughter, something's wrong with your daughter. And I'm like, well, I know. She'd just been diagnosed with a very serious, not just, but she had a very serious neurological disorder. that we're always dealing with. But and he actually described it just with a candle. It was perfect. And I'm like, you know, I don't know how you know this. I don't know how you know. And the translator guy had come in and he was telling me what he was saying. And he said it's up. You have to. She is fine. You are the problem. You know, you have to fix you, and she'll take care of herself. She's extremely strong. Anyway, so he said, "What's her name?" And I said, "Hannah." And so all of a sudden, like I said Hannah, and Hannah Wakgadan Hawe is her name. She has a Mohawk name because I'm part Mohawk. And all of a sudden, like I could hear chanting, and I don't know whether I imagined it, but I could hear the entire village was chanting. They were saying Bantush, Bantush, which means thank you in Mayan. They're going, thank you, grandmother, grandfather, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I could hear Hannah Wakgadan Hawe, Hannah Wakgadan Hawe. So the whole village was chanting my daughter's name in amongst their prayers. Right.
Yeah.
And here I am, like kneeling on the ground, and these people who live in the most remote part of Guatemala that, you know, live in beautiful dirt huts, but live very close to the earth and, you know, literally of the earth. And there they are praying for me and my daughter. And it was just like, I couldn't believe, I thought I was dreaming it. And I had like sweat and snot and things just, you know, and the shaman was holding me and I was bawling my eyes out. And I swear to God, I fell in love with that shaman, and Roberto, I think his name was. Anyway, it was just one of those moments where it's like you realize that you really all are part of this one magical planet. And it just, yeah, that's one of them.
Oh my God. I want to go to a cave with a man and have
him spit at me.
Yeah, I mean, I want that experience. But did you so okay, he tells you first you're void of spirit inside. Yeah. And then, you know, after that experience, what changed for you?
Well, so what happened, a lot changed. What happened, I didn't really know what to do because it was kind of embarrassing, right? The next day. Well, that day, because I'm still in the village, right? And we're still all eating, and it's kind of like, I'm like the sweaty crying one that had snot running down her face that you guys were all feeling sorry for. But that night I went to bed, which was hysterical. I mean, just heartbreakingly lovely people. So they had a small hut, probably the size of my bedroom, and they cordoned it off with a curtain. So 4 kids, 2 parents all slept in a 5-foot by 8-foot room. And I got the other 5-foot by 8-foot room, of course, by myself. Oh, and wow. I slept, and I couldn't, they actually had to carry me to bed. I couldn't walk after that because I had been on my knees for I don't know how long. And they carried me up to the bed. They put me to bed, and I woke up and I thought they were tapping me, and I had chickens tapping my legs, you know, like waking me up. It was the most beautiful way to wake up. I had chickens crawling all over me and pecking at me.
Oh my God.
It was amazing. And so I go down and I sit at the big table in the main house of the village, and I'm like, okay, what do I do now? And the translator guy's, I don't know, dude. Like, I've never seen anything like that ever happen. And he said, and I've been at plenty of ceremonies I've never seen. So I was like, oh, fuck, what do I do? And the shaman came and sat with us, and he was like, how do you feel? And I said, I just drained. I don't know where to start. I don't know what. And he just said, do you have ceremony? Can you have a ceremony? And he gave me a pack of it was all wound up of sage to burn. Mm-hmm. And he said, just take this and go with your daughter and just start a ceremony. Anything you want to do. He said, I don't care what you do with it. Just start a ceremony. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did when she was little. And I've been doing it ever since. So I have some Mohawk heritage, and it put me in touch with all that. So
how old were you when you started to get in touch with your Mohawk heritage? It didn't happen until later in life.
Oh yeah, no, till I had kids. I mean, I knew when she was born, when we were living in Oka, just across the river from Oka, and my ex-husband worked in Oka, and we had very good friends. And I had an elder there, and so we were very much a part of Ganazadage and Oka. That, like Hannah, my daughter, I went into labor on the barricades. I don't know if you remember, but in Oka,
I read about it.
yeah, there was a massive protest that lasted all summer. And when I was at the barricades and when they came down, I got dragged through an SQ car window, police window, and I mean, my window by an SQ officer, and went into premature labor with my daughter.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So she was given a Mohawk name. I gave her Wakaron Hawi, which is she carries a snowflake because it was snowing the day she was born.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah. So it was when my kids were born that I got.
Aww.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. The photo tours. Does one, if one wanted to partake, which one does.
Well, come, it's a riot.
Just now I'm looking up, I have a Canon camera, not this one here, the webcam, but but I mean, like, I'm not a photographer. Do you have to be a photographer?
No. Oh no, we've had people just come with their phones or little happy snappers, or some people just come just to learn about, because it's not really it's about the photography, but it's also about just seeing the world differently and experiencing the world differently. And I've had professional photographers, like say they were landscape photographers that were coming to learn more about portraiture, or wedding photographers that wanted to up their game and do documentary, or, so I've had professional photographers, and I've had 80-year-old ladies come along. I mean, just hysterical, with just a little happy snapper and not have a clue how to work it. No, I mean, and everybody has a riot. Like it is really fun. And it's, yeah, come.
Dale, I want to come, and I want Dale to come because I know I think he would enjoy it. But I would go even if he could just let me make some more money, because it's been a few years. Let me put this record out.
Start saving.
Start saving. I'm seriously, like, I would love to I'd love to just like learn from you and of course just be there with everybody. And
it's more about the way we travel, because it's not like, I mean, we have it organized in such a way where we spend the night at the end of the day at a certain place, and then we have ideas along the way. But I mean, I think 9 times out of 10, we never stick to what we're supposed to do. And we always just head off with some local family or end up eating in someone's house and heading. Yeah. It's not like a normal tour or anything like that, but you should come.
You've been all over the world. So you're going to places where people don't necessarily have clean water, don't have the abundance of access to food that we do.
Yeah. 3 hours north of Ottawa.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. And then you go back to Ottawa, you come back home. Like, is there like an adjustment? What's going on inside you when you come home and you're like, I don't fucking take a bath?
Well, the thing is, most places I go, they don't have clean water, clean clothes, it's not, but I think the word abundance, you just have to me, I don't necessarily think just because your clothes are clean and you've got clean water, like that you have an abundance or that your life is any better. I think actually I have experienced more love, more respect, more role models in, even in just watching children relate to each other in, the barrios of Sao Paulo and in the worst parts of the Colombian drug cartels and in India, and, where the kids are going through the dumps. And I've actually seen more love and more respect than I see in a Canadian home. So my perspective of what abundance is, or what, is a little different. I actually feel not happier, but I feel more fulfilled and when I'm traveling than I do when I'm home. So I have a tougher time coming home because, I mean, you can ask pretty well anyone that travels with me, I start crying 3 days before I have to go home. Like, I don't want to go home. Like, and it's horrible to say that as a mother and a wife and yada, yada, but I generally never want to come home. So that I'm a bit of a weird one that way. But not to say that you wish there was something you could do when you, I mean, literally, I'm talking 3 hours north of Ottawa and there's not clean running water on an Indigenous reserve. You know, in Colombia, it was really hard because people had been rooted, kicked out of their little barrio homes because of the violence and the drug cartels and the gangs. And kids are like peeking through windows, trying not to get shot, basically. And so, yeah, I mean, stuff like that just breaks your heart. I went to a, AIDS orphanage in South Africa, and I went to a home for child prostitutes in Vietnam. And everywhere I go, you just sort of want to grab one or two of them and shove them in your suitcase and bring them home with you, but then they'd be miserable. So it's hard. It takes a major adjustment. Whenever I covered a war zone or anything, because of the adrenaline of being in a war zone is very different than kind of just going to a poverty-stricken place. That's very different. You definitely need a decompression time, and you can talk to any soldier, anybody that it's I guess a form of PTSD or a form of, you definitely have to have I always would take like a week or something or 2 weeks, and on the way back from Afghanistan, I'd go for a couple of days to Istanbul just to kind of decompress. And or on the way back from India, being in the dumps and stuff, I'd have to stop in Portugal and just hang out by the ocean for 2 days or something. So it's sort of like, that's how I dealt with it.
Yeah.
One might say I haven't really dealt with it, but talk to my family.
Well, maybe there's no way to deal with that. Maybe it just becomes, you learn to just move on to the next moment. I was curious. I mean, I've read a lot of like self-help books over the years, and, things on the topic of like healing. And so I guess there's this idea at some point, I thought maybe like I would be healed if I did this or this. And then then at some point somebody told me you could be on healing for the rest of your life. And like, if you can accept that, then that'd help you out. And I think it has. Like, how do you feel about yourself? Like, with your traumas growing at a young age and all the things you've seen, like, do you think it's possible to be healed, or are you on a healing journey, or what? Do you even think about that?
I have to say, my dad, who was capable of probably the most love of anybody I know, but also capable of the most anger and violence, but just an amazing man who had this amazing way. And I think that's why I always flip things. I never really take what people say. I always try to flip it and look at something from a completely different angle. And I think he taught me that. He said, if ever you're feeling, and it sounds cliche, and it is kind of cliche, but he said, if ever you're feeling down or depressed or like you don't know what to do or you need to be healed, just concentrate on healing somebody else. Like, stop thinking about yourself. So I don't spend a lot of time trying to heal myself. I think what feeds me now as I've gotten older and more able to actually just sit or just walk or just do something just for me.
Yeah.
I've gotten way better at that. So, but to me, I have to be somewhere else. I can't do it at home. I have to be traveling. I have to be in the ocean or on a beach or on a mountain or in a hut, or I don't know. I have to be somewhere else, but I can't heal watching a video in my living room. I can't do it. Or
you got to make that video. You got to make it. You're a maker, creator. What's next for you?
Well, I've got a bunch of projects on the go. I'm in production with the Hemlock film called In the Quiet and the Dark. And it basically is talking about it's talking about the death of a species, eastern hemlock, because of this bug. But also it's talking about the people who are just living, breathing, saving this tree, trying to save this tree. And then I kind of get into women and nature and the whole idea of grief, ecological grief, and not too much on that because there's already been a film about that, but it's sort of this idea that women are nurturers, and even, if they don't have children, they're trying to save something. So I'm kind of getting into all that too, but also just, we have a hemlock stand just behind our house at the Tupperville Falls in the Annapolis Valley, and that's where I go do my ceremony for my daughter. So, and if that baby dies, there's one tree there that is an elder tree, which I would probably guess at about 300 years old. And if that goes, I don't know, just be really sad for this community and me and my kids. And yeah. So it sort of was a selfish story, and then I'm developing a series on midwives called The Delivery Line, about midwives on the front lines of like poverty and war and climate change and gender wars and all kinds of things. So that one's sort of in development. And and I'm going down to edit my hemlock film, going down to Mexico to edit at my beautiful sister's casita.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I've got a couple other things that are brewing.
One of the things I love about doing these talks with people I love and friends that I don't get to hang out with or see, because either where we live or just everybody's so busy, just slogging away. But is that I got to do a deep dive into your work, and it affected me, and I think in a lot of different meaningful ways. And I think you're really special and talented and magical, and all that pain you had to go through. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But at the same time,
we all go through it. We all go through some form of that.
It's like there's a part of you that goes, I mean, I don't want you to go through pain, but at the same time, I'm like, fuck, but man, it made her like who she is today. And that's this incredible role model and woman and artist. And, it's remarkable. So.
Well, thank you. Well, and I also want to say another magic moment was actually being in the recording studio with you guys, because I love the film that we made together, and the films, we made several. Yeah,
the It'll Be All Right interviews, documenting that whole album, the making of, and I want to say, like, I feel like maybe you got this sense from me and maybe you didn't, but I was very much beginning, I think, to learn how to open up about things. And I feel like I was still so, like, things were still so heavy for me and, like, guarded in some ways. And I wanted to be open and but, like, I just feel like in some ways I look back and I go, oh, I wish I could have given her more. Like, I wish it could have been.
Oh, you did. You gave quite a bit. You gave quite a bit.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I thought you were perfect. I thought it was great. And that you were really that was a leap, that project. That was a big leap for you. You were heading into a quite different territory. And I thought that was really brave. And to talk, because most people take those kind of leaps and they don't want to talk about how scared they are to do it. Like, does this make any sense? Should I, I thought it was really brave of you. I thought you were super brave. We were both, Jamie and I, were so impressed with you, and your whole, and, Dale and everybody, and it was such a beautiful, creative, funny, wonderful, loving process. It was great.
I don't want to say goodbye to you. Oh, I don't want to say goodbye to you.
Welcome to the Heartbeat Hotline, 1-902-669-4769. I'm the host of A Chat with Heart podcast, Christina Martin, and I'm so excited you called. Leave me your question, suggestion for the podcast, or a comment about this episode. Please be aware your message may be used on the podcast and social media. Tell me your name, where you're calling from, and it's also fine if you want to remain anonymous. Thanks for listening. Have a great fucking day. Thanks for listening to A Chat with Heart podcast, Produced and written by me, Christina Martin, and co-produced and engineered by Dale Murray. Check out Dale's website, dalemurray.ca. The podcast theme song, Talk About It, and I Don't Want to Say Goodbye to You were written by me and recorded by Dale Murray. You can find my music on Bandcamp and all the places you stream music. Visit my Patreon page to become a monthly or yearly supporter of this podcast and my music endeavors. If you're new to Patreon, it's a membership platform that helps creators get paid. Sign up at patreon.com/Christina Martin. I would love it if you had time to share, rate, leave a review, and subscribe to A Chat with Heart on all the places you listen to podcasts. Wishing you, my little heartbeats, a great day.